All right. Everybody's good? Yeah, they should be up on Blackboard. I'm sorry, Canvas. Look under Files. Just look under Files. Yeah, let's have a look just to make sure.
I'm trying to find it for the quiz.
I think I put them under Files. Files. Yeah, book PowerPoints. There you go. It says they're published. You seen them?
I only saw chapter 1, I didn't see chapter 0.
They should all be there. Well, chapter 0 won't be there because this is all stuff that we're talking about. Also, while we're in here, a couple different things that I would like for everybody to do. If you go to Account and Profile, I would love for everybody to take a moment and make sure your photo is in there. All right, it builds a sense of community. And then another thing that I would like for you to do is under Settings, you're capable in here of adding additional contact information. I'd like for you to add your cell phone in there. And once you've done that, you can come into notifications and you can click on the different notifications that you want to receive. So for example, you get email reminders, you'll get or text reminders for due dates, discussions, announcements that I have, all of those things, you'll get those. And if you're like Mike, these machines don't have a camera on them, so I can't put a photo up there. Apparently, it's really, really nice. It's so nice and responsive that you can use your phone or whatever without installing the app. Like I had several students in my 101 that they just they're like, man, this is great. And I was like, what'd you do? Install the app? And they're like, no, we just did it in Safari. Yeah, did the whole 9 yards. They updated everything from a mobile web browser, which was pretty nice. So please take a moment and do that. You can either do it now or you can do it later. I don't really care when, but I'd like for you to do that. Some other things for today that I want to talk about here. I can bring this up. So I really wanted you to know how to install an operating system, and now you've done that twice. You can see how mundane that could get after a while. There's not a lot of difference. I mean, you might encounter some issues later on down the road, but not a lot of difference in what operating systems we install. So with that being said, I want to show you some pre-built operating systems that I have. So if you come under the Windows Explorer and you go to CSIT Fixed, under here you're going to find pre-built OSs. And under pre-built OSs you're going to find VMware Professional Builds. And you're going to see Windows 7 Lab 2, you're going to see Windows 10 and Windows 2012 R2. At the very least, I encourage you to use the Windows 7 and the 2012. I encourage you to start using the Windows 10 as you feel comfortable. The way you're positioned, you're in an in-between kind of mode, right? Enterprise is still using a lot of 7, but by the time you get out, the vast majority of it's going to be Windows 10. So if you want to get yourself familiar with Windows 10, now's a good time to start doing that, all right? Because by the time you graduate in another couple of years, it's going to be a lot of Windows 10 that's going to be out there. Windows 10 just like this month overtook Windows 7 for the first time since Windows 10 came out. It just overtook Windows 7 as far as install base goes. So it's a good time to start moving towards playing with that. However, one of the problems is your book doesn't have instructions based around Windows 10. And that's why I want you to do it, but only after you feel a little bit comfortable, you know. And keep in mind, once you understand how to configure a firewall in one thing, and you conceptually understand I'm going to unblock a service or a port, and I understand the difference between private and public and network and all of those, it doesn't matter what you're sitting in front of. You just have to figure out how to get to it to configure the firewall because you've conceptually learned it. All right? So take that away with you in the Windows 7 versus Windows 10 thing. While you may not have explicit instructions on how to get to where you need to be, you have a conceptual understanding of where you need to be. All right? So I want you to take those and either drag them to your desktop or drag them to that SSD so you have a copy of them when you need them. In addition, feel free to take those home. There's not a license in any of them. They'll set up just fine for you at home. All right? And you can play with them at home and use them. All right? And we'll come back to this. Do you have any, I'll ask before we get into some other things that I'd like for us to play around with in here. Do you have any questions? Yep.
So you said there's a problem with VMware 14 strictly roll back to 12 for full computers, or?
I'll say don't walk back and forth with the different things. If you want to do things both at home and in here using the exact same stuff, be on the same version. So that means you have to walk back to 12 at home. All right. If you don't plan on doing that, 14 will be fine. It was a problem with the installation as far as credentials. For whatever reason, it needed administrative credentials when it came to connecting and using that. It was actually the driver for the network card is what it came down to. So I was like, we ain't figuring this out in the middle of the semester. So here's a term for you, SCCM. It's a software management platform. Matt Brisky, maybe I'll come in and have him come in one day and show some of that to you. He said, delete this package, install this package. And throughout the day, as students logged in the background, that's why machines slow down sometimes, it uninstalled VMware 14 and installed VMware 12, all without any students noticing. All I did was I came in yesterday afternoon because I needed it for my 315, and I logged into all the machines. I walked around and made sure that a little icon showed up on the desktop. As soon as that happened, I told me it was installed, and I logged them off. But otherwise, you know, it's a nice automation tool. Any other questions? That was a good question. All right, so the other day, one of the things I wanted you to reach out to was a program called Nanite. It's a great program from an IT kind of perspective. If you come out to that and have a look at it, you're capable of downloading and installing completely automated a bunch of different free and open source software. So inside of your machine, you only have access to Internet Explorer. So you can say, well, I want to download Chrome and Firefox. If you want to do Opera, you can do Opera. Maybe you want some security if you want to do that. Development tools, always have Notepad++ on a machine. Always. Just always have it there. And then there's a lot of other things over through here, like here's some utilities like TeamViewer 13, VNC is here, WinDirstat is here. I'm not going to let you do it now, but I encourage you to play around with those at home. WinDirstat's pretty cool because if you wonder where's all my room going on my hard drive, WinDirstat will give you a visualization of big files on your computer. So you can drill in and you can find that, I don't know, that ISO that was hiding in your downloads that you didn't know was there, and you can delete it and free up 5 or 6 gigs of storage, right? So it's pretty cool. And there's a lot of other ones up there that I'll let you kind of play with. But at the very least, I'd like to see you download Chrome, Firefox, Notepad++, and then you click on Get Your Nanite, and it'll download a very small file, and when you run it, it'll automatically install and or update whatever software you have on that machine. So it'll run through and it'll check everything on this for me. Somebody tell me what a firewall is. We haven't actually started covering like chapters 1 and 2 and 3 yet. This is getting you prepared to be able to do some of this stuff on your own. So what's a firewall?
Something that decides what can come in and out of the system.
Yep. And I like to think very general. It determines access to a device. So at home, you have a machine which is protected by a software firewall. Okay? You want to get real technical, these are all software firewalls. But we refer to them as a software firewall. And then your computer goes out to your Wi-Fi router, which also has a firewall in it. And then that router connects two collisionable domains. So it goes out to the internet, which is provided to you by your ISP. Usually there's like a modem or something in between there, right? And then your Wi-Fi router connects all the different devices internally, either wired or wirelessly. Go ahead, Jordan. What's the question?
What was the first word saying firewall?
Wi-Fi router, firewall. Is that what you want? Right? So that router that you have at home, it has a firewall, it has a DHCP server, it has Wi-Fi connectivity, it has a switch. It has DHC capabilities, has DNS forwarding capabilities, and you can equip it with a whole bunch of other things if you want. So effectively, we have two firewalls here. Firewall 1, we could refer to this at home as our edge firewall or our edge router. And then we have our device firewall. All right? So when you want to set up something like a web server at home, you have to modify two firewalls. You have to modify, let's say we're going to allow access to our web server. You have to allow port 80 through on your edge firewall. And then you have to adjust the rules for either the port or the service on the inner firewall. Now this is really important, especially when we're playing around with guest machines. When we start trying to ping back and forth, and we start trying to throw files back and forth, you're going to run into problems. And the first thing I want to say is, check your firewall settings. And in no way, shape, or form do I want you to get in the habit of turning off a firewall. I want you to conceptually wrap your head around it and figure out how to do it. Because if you get in any kind of a habit of, I'm having problems, I'm just going to shut off the firewall, I should be fired.
Yeah, not on an enterprise level.
Right? Exactly. Your whole company's going down in a matter of minutes if you just shut down the firewall because you can't figure out how to get a service through. I'm dead serious. It'll be a matter of minutes, and your whole enterprise will be down. So there's two different things. All right, on this edge firewall, the way we would configure it, let's say that I have a web server running, and I have somebody out here on an iPhone that wants to connect to my web server. Well, they make a request, and I'm going to kind of abstract out everything. They make a request that tells us where our web server is located. Ultimately, it's an IP address, but a web server request is made. That request is directed at my external, my edge firewall. And I have to point that firewall and make an exception on the edge firewall to my entire internal firewall. So on my edge, I would say any request on port 80. Why do I keep saying port 80? That's the port that HTTP runs on, right? My web server. That's my listening port. Every service, every server has a listening port. And maybe on Monday what we'll do is we'll set up a web server with XAMPP like I did in 3.15 the other day, and we'll get into more of the nitty-gritty around these firewalls than anything else. So port 80 forward to an IP address. So this is known as a port forwarding firewall. And that's what we all have. Nobody has a more advanced firewall than a port forwarding firewall. So that means that you need to know what your IP address on your web server is. So forward to IP address 192.168.0.100. I'm just saying maybe that's what it is. If I look at, let's say that this is my server here. If I look at my IP address on this, I say IP-CON-FIG. You might want to write that down. My IP address is 10.20.103.191. So if that machine literally was what I was configuring in here, instead of 192.168.0.100, I would put in the IP address of that machine I'm trying to forward it to, which is 10.whatever there. Then the other thing we have to do is we have to come into this software firewall of the actual server, and I have to configure the port or the service here. In this case, port 80 or the service is Apache. All right? Everybody kind of with me? So let me show you, one day I'll show you how to get to this. That's in your router settings. Your router is typically at one of the following: 192.168.0.1 or 192.168.1.1. You can go home and try that out. And that should get you to your Wi-Fi router. Anybody know what the default for modems is, by the way? If you want to check out what kind of a modem you have, you can, in your status, you can go to 192.168.100.1, and you'll probably get to your modem, and it'll show you the status of your modem and everything. All right? You can like reboot your cable modem that way. So anyways, let me show you real quick because I only have 0 minutes. You're going to click on the orb. You're going to type in firewall, and I'll pick up here on Monday. You're going to type in firewall, and you want that advanced. See where it says Windows Firewall with advanced security? That's the one you want. That's going to give you what you need as a power user. You are no longer Joe Schmo user. You are now a technician that's here to solve problems. So we have inbound rules, which is what we would adjust in our software, inbound, and we have outbound rules, meaning what do we want to allow out to communicate. All right? So right here in the beginning, you'll see that Apache actually set up a few rules, and you'll see them here is Apache HTTP server on private, on public, so on and so forth. So we can double click on any of these, and it'll say, do you want to allow the connection or block the connection? What is the scope? There's a bunch of different things in here that you need to take the time. These are basics that you really need to kind of grasp with, kind of come to grasps with, before we can start doing some of the labs and allowing this communication to go back and forth. So over the weekend, on your own computer, you don't have to do any, you don't have to install VMware. If you want to, that's great. I'll make it available to you after a while, by the way. Yeah, you'll get a link after a while, and I'll put it up in Canvas. I'll put a link that'll take you right to, it'll be after a while, like 3 o'clock. After a while, like literally after a while. But you don't even have to install that if you don't want. you can just start looking around in that firewall, trying to understand it, maybe read up on it a little bit so you have an idea. See if you can reach your own Wi-Fi router. If you're in a dorm, you ain't going to be able to do it. But if you're off campus, you should be able to access it through one of those ports. If you have a cable modem, you should be able to access it, through one of those IP addresses. If you have a cable modem, you should be able to access it through that IP address. That's all I want you to do right now is play, experiment. Try to set up VMware at home. If you struggle and you fail, so be it. That's the way it goes. All right? I'll see you on Monday. Yes?
Can we just exit out of it now, or do we have to pause
Oh, and you can pause it. You always want to pause it.
it? Okay.
Yeah, you always want to pause it. And that takes a snapshot of the state of it. Make sure you've downloaded. Make sure those have downloaded, by the way, those two you were downloading.